Right,
I thought
okay.
you
All
had
my
this.
knobs are in. All my knobs are in order. That's quite funny when it's electoral dysfunction, isn't it? All my knobs.
Knobs are in order.
My knobs are in
Makes it
order.
sound like us. We're the
Well,
knobs.
that's true,
And
yeah.
there's a pub near me, and we call it it's called the King's Head, and we call it the Knob.
Is that because only posh people drink there?
No. God, my God, no. Posh people don't drink there. It's a pub with a flat roof.
Occasionally a dog
What,
stand
yeah,
on the
my-
roof to
My,
bark.
my Asian friend always says, for black and Asian people, avoid a pub with a flat roof.
Welcome to Electoral Dysfunction with me, Beth Rigby.
Me, Jess Phillips.
I'm Ruth Davidson.
Now, I'm Sky News' political editor, and I'm joined by these two powerhouses of British politics.
I'm Jess Phillips. I am a Labour MP, but I don't really think I'm here to be a Labour MP. I'm going to be like a socialist rabble-rouser.
And
I'm Ruth Davidson. I'm the former leader of the Scottish Conservatives, and I sit in the Lords. And whatever the opposite of a socialist rabble-rouser is, I think that's what I'm here to be.
now, this is a brand new podcast. Thanks for listening. We're going to be bringing it to you once a week, every Friday. We want you to be involved in this podcast. Text us, email us at electoraldysfunction@sky.uk. You can leave us a WhatsApp voice note. I'd love a few of those on 07934 200 444. That's 07934 200 444. And you can also find me on Twitter. Tweet me at Beth Rigby. I love this. I've got two phones, now I've got a third.
You're like a drug
I'm
dealer.
like a drug dealer.
Yeah.
I deal in politics, though.
Nobody wants
I
to
got
buy
shivers.
that, Beth.
Do you think I'm in the wrong business, Jess?
I'm not suggesting
Deal
that
in
we start
politics.
becoming drug dealers week one of the podcast.
Well, you've got that really big kind of like gold chain that you wear as well. So you just need an XL bully in both hands
Yeah.
with a full set of Sovy rings.
Yeah.
You'll be grand. You
Three
can,
phones,
yeah.
big chain.
Have you got some blacked out windows on your Land Rover?
I can get one. I haven't got a Land Rover, but I'll get one.
Okay.
If you feel that's going to
Well,
complete my look.
I think you should ask Sky for it. I think it should be a branded Landy.
We have called this pod Electoral Dysfunction for a couple of different reasons. One, because we're heading into an election here, and many people are disillusioned by politics and politicians. Apathy is the watchword, if you like, of 2024 going into our general election. It's also not just an election here, it's a bumper year. It's a gigantic, a record-breaking election year around the world, because about 60 countries, maybe even more, are going to the polls. That's an estimated 4 billion voters around the world. I think that's about half of the world's population. So this is a mega election year. And we want to start this discussion. I'm going to start it every week, kicking off with who is on top this week and who is having an electoral dysfunction. So it's the morning after the night before. The Rochdale by-election result is just in. Who's on top, Ruth?
Do you know, like the words struggle to form in my mouth, but George Galloway is on top, having won that, and not having just won it, but having won it handsomely. He's got over 40% of the vote. Labour obviously withdrew their support for their candidate over things that they'd said about anti-Semitism. They came fourth, having held the seat, that candidate. I mean, I think also, like, shout out to Dave Tully, local businessman, who came second ahead of the Conservatives. I have to say, what a choice that was facing the people of Rochdale. I feel pretty bad for them, to be honest with you. And in terms of a turnout, I think it was about 39% of registered voters went to the actual polls yesterday.
It rarely breaches 40%, so it's not a bad turnout in Rochdale. George Galloway has stood, I mean, it's like his entire political career of the last 15 years could just be like insert name of place. I'm going to pretend I care about the people. So he has stood in West Yorkshire, in Batley and Spen, in Bradford. At the last general election, he stood in the West Midlands, where his campaign, as best I can remember, seemed to focus entirely on low traffic neighbourhoods, up the workers. And
He stood in the Scottish borders. He stood in Glasgow.
Yeah.
Where did he oust Una King from? That was a London seat,
London.
wasn't it? Was that Retford or no?
Bethnal Green. Was it
Bethnal Green and Bow, which is one of last week's no-go areas, I believe. You know, he will turn up in a town and make charismatic speeches in his hat. My dad used to say that if you show me a man who wears a hat when he's driving and I'll show you a scoundrel.
Oh, my dad was very similar. A man that regularly wears a hat indoors is a wr'un. Just can't trust him. Can't trust a man that wears a hat indoors. Dad
George Galloway is your classic grievance politician, in my view, and he, I don't think he will offer anything. I think he will offer division and upset in Westminster. But what bothers me, I will go home today. It is early on a Friday morning. I will go into my office and I will be dealing with cases of people who are living in hotel accommodation and with their 4 children in one room trying to study for their exams. I will deal with victims of domestic violence, fleeing terrible violence and not getting the services that they need. I will be dealing with kids who can't get a school place, have been off-rolled. Do I think that George Galloway is going to offer a service to the people of Rochdale before inevitably he probably will carpet bag off to somewhere else?
Let's back up a bit. What happened in Rochdale was the Labour Party had a candidate, Azhar Ali, who'd been a very local activist and councillor, hadn't he, there?
Yeah, in
for a long time, 3 decades. He made some anti-Semitic remarks at a meeting. They were leaked. They were published. Labour stood by him for 24 hours and then realised that this was not a position that could hold with a leader who'd said he was zero tolerance for anti-Semitism. So they withdraw that support, and you end up in a situation where Labour's pulled out of the race. George Galloway, who I should say isn't here to defend himself, as we talk about him, he's there campaigning. He said when he won, Jess, that this win was for the people, this was for Gaza. And he also said, in terms of Keir Starmer, he said, you'll pay a high price for the role you have played covering for the catastrophe presently going on in occupied Palestine. I mean, look, George Galloway is a megaphone politician, isn't he? And he's coming back to the Commons and he's going to use this platform of this win to stoke those divisions and tensions running not just through the Labour Party, but through the country, communities across the country, about the conflict in Israel-Hamas conflict.
He's hiding in plain sight. Like, it's not even just what he said from the platform when he won. I mean, I've got his literature that he put out here in front of me, that this is what he was dog whistling to the electorate on. If Labour lose this by-election, Keir Starmer could well be forced out as Labour leader. Sir Keir Starmer, a top supporter of Israel, out. Imagine that. The people of Rochdale coming together to topple the hated Labour leader. We have the power to do that. It's in your hands, brothers and sister. Dog whistle, dog whistle, dog whistle.
Attacking Keir Starmer for his views or for his actions, or discussing it even, is completely and utterly legitimate. What George Galloway needs to realise is to stop people being starved in Gaza was going to take more than megaphones. And you would never, ever, ever, he would never be able to deliver what is going to be needed to deliver a ceasefire and a future for Palestine. But he is not a legitimate voice for the people of Gaza. He's just trying to attack Keir Starmer. Knock yourself out. Attack Keir Starmer. That's politics. I'm here for that.
But the thing, he does that in every election, because when he was standing in the borders, it was the thing that he cared most about was against a second referendum. When he stood in Glasgow in 2011, when we faced off against each other, I've actually had to campaign against George Galloway. It was he was in a Respect splinter party that he set up called Respect George Galloway Coalition Against Cuts, and it was an anti-austerity party. When he stood against Una King in whatever bit of London that was, because London is just one big place to me. It was on a different platform. It's a different platform every time.
When it was in the West Midlands, it was literally about bollards. It was about low traffic neighbourhoods.
But Ruth, he is also effective, though, right? He goes to seats where there is division and controversy. And he's done it 3 times now. He's
also lost 9 times. He's had a lot of misses as well as hits.
How effective is he? What was it like campaigning against him? Was it hard?
Not particularly, because his MO, as far as I saw, was that he stood on a soapbox in a busy junction in Glasgow in the morning, and for maybe an hour and a half, he just shouted at passers-by. And you talk about like charismatic speech making. I mean, it was of the old school. I mean, it was like Speaker's Corner type stuff.
Okay, but going back to Rochdale, he won by nearly 6,000 votes. You know, the main political parties were pushed right down the running order. I mean, Dave Tully, an independent came second. Labour said this morning, Jess, they said they deeply regret not being able to field a candidate. They apologised to the people of Rochdale. They said they'd get their act together, select a new candidate, get campaigning for a general election. They also said Galloway only won because Labour did not stand. I've got two things I want to ask you, Jess. Do you agree with that? Do you think that this was... Or is it a deeper problem that the Labour Party have? And how much of a problem is this going to be for Starmer?
So, in answer to your first question about the Labour Party saying, oh, well, you know, he wouldn't have won if the Labour Party... Who knows is the actual answer to that question, because, the whole thing was just a mess from beginning to end. I would say, though, that it is a testament to a broader problem. George Galloway came quite close in the Batley and Spen by-election, and actually that, to me, should have been a sign to the Labour Party then that there was a grievance against a classically Labour-leaning group were upset. And now the Rochdale by-election, you know, there is a clear problem. There is a clear problem with Muslim communities feeling represented currently by the Labour movement. All the stuff that's been going on in politics for the last 2-3 weeks, this idea of mob rule, right? Stop saying mob when you mean Muslims, like stop describing huge groups of people as a mob. But this idea that the Muslim communities, and I represent one, or that I am some sort of bending over backwards to people, Muslim people do not want to be represented by total charlatans. They also want to come to you for help and need decent representation and good people, both from within and without their community. And the idea that they have been saying for some time, we are losing faith. If only we'd noticed it in Scotland, for example, I think is a bigger problem.
I have a little bit of sympathy here, and let me tell you why that is. Because I agree with Jess. I think that there's two things going on that are slightly separate. One of which is there's a huge amount of people across the United Kingdom, not only in Muslim communities, but in communities everywhere, of all faiths and backgrounds, who feel that they are not listened to, that politics doesn't represent them, that they are underserved, that they are talked at, that they're not participative in, that politics is something done to them, not something that they feel that they have agency within, and they feel like they're helpless in so many ways. And I think that's one thing that existed before Gaza. I think what the Gaza thing has exploded is the fact that Keir Starmer had so much work to do after Jeremy Corbyn to try and rebuild trust with the Jewish communities across this country, that he had to go and he had to make sure that he put in the hard yards, that he went to temple, that he, was shown the Torah, that he spent time with communities, that he spoke directly and addressed and acknowledged and made reparation for what had happened under Jeremy Corbyn. And that is now being used against him. And the bit that I read out earlier, which was about him being this great friend of Israel, that was being used as a stick to beat him with, is a backlash against all of the hard work that he had to do. He had to do that. If he was going to be a credible candidate for the Prime Minister of this country, he had to make that reparation. And he gets a big tick in the box from a lot of people for that. But what the Gaza thing has now exploded is that he doesn't seem to know what his line is on the Middle East conflict, and it's moved so much, and he seems caught in headlights, and he needs to work out what it is. And the idea that they tried to stand beside their candidate for a bit in Rochdale, Azhar Ali, and then discarded them sort of 24 hours later, just showed that level of panic in the leader of the opposition's office. And he needs to nail that down, and he needs to make sure that when he's trying to hold the factions of his party together, he's got the strength and the authority, which the polls give him, if he just had the bravery to do it, to set the tone, to say what the line is, to stick to the line, and then to make the arguments that supports that line. Go out and have confidence in your position. And actually, if you front foot this, he could turn this into a strength.
So do you think, following from what Ruth's saying about the position, that this is Number one, this has opened up the Pandora's box now, and Starmer is not going to be able to just try and push this aside. And also it's a wake-up call to the leadership that this is going into an election potentially in many seats, an actual issue now that they cannot just try and turn away from. So he's going to have to tackle it.
Yeah, look, I think that the Muslim community have had a very, very tough week in what to them feels like a couple of pretty tough years. And that reparations paid to the Jewish community, rightly so, funnily enough, we should be sat here saying that those reparations need to be very heavily paid after the last week of disgrace from the Conservative Party.
Yeah.
Like those, they're going to have to do that reparations work. But actually, if I, as a representative of and somebody who lives in a community and has, my family, some of my family are Muslim. They don't, to be perfectly honest, won't particularly necessarily want reparations from the Conservative Party because they never thought anything of you in the first place in lots of cases. They feel, disappointment in the thing that they loved. And let me tell you, the level of loyalty and work doing the groundwork, the actual work of electioneering by my Muslim community in my community in Birmingham is, that they feel like they're owed a bit of attention, I suppose, actually. And so actually seeking reparations from the Conservative Party won't be the top of their list.
I mean, your community might not be traditionally a Conservative supporting community. Absolutely understand that. But actually, there are a lot of people who follow Islam who are Conservatives or who are Liberal Democrat or who follow no thing. And it doesn't actually matter who the Prime Minister of the country is. The Prime Minister of the country should be a leader for all faiths and all people. And they should be able to act in a manner that's bigger because of what's happening in Gaza and in Palestine and the divisions that is opening up. Like, these communities feel under threat. They feel vulnerable, they feel unprotected.
Obviously, George Galloway isn't here. I think you've both made your views about him pretty clear, but I think, what he would say is that this result is a result of voters' rejection of the two main parties in Westminster. He probably would say, I know you look annoyed, Jess, but I imagine he would say that the Muslim community is angry with Keir Starmer and his stance on Gaza, and that this is a response to that, and that he's going to work for the people of Rochdale. George Galloway on top this week because he's won a by-election, as much as that pains you both. And the electoral dysfunction this week is Parliament.
It is, and can I just say, to take it in its most literal terms, the idea of dysfunction, nothing. I know that people in the country feel like nothing works. You can't get a dentist appointment. You can't get on a bloody train. It's nothing. I can't think of anything that does work. And, you do a little jig when your passport arrives in time. And it's like that's what the notion is now. Pleased that their bins get picked up. That's how low our expectations have fallen. But the level of dysfunction currently in our governance of our country and Parliament, not just all the scenes we saw over the Gaza votes and literally every political party, sort of basically looking terrible, but the stuff like civil servants have down tools because we're waiting for an election, and it just feels to me like it's run its course. It's run out of road. This Parliament, and I don't mean the building. When we say Parliament in politics, we mean the sessions, the periods of time. There needs to be an election. I'm not just saying that from an electioneering point of view. It's literally not capable of functioning
also
anymore.
The thing is also, I was in Central Lobby, right, covering the debates around the ceasefire motion the SNP had laid, calling for an immediate ceasefire. They also talked about the collective punishment of the Palestinians, language that the Labour leadership said it could not support. There was all this argy-bargy about a debate on a ceasefire, the SNP motion. The Speaker then worried about MP safety, is what he said, then let Labour vote on their motion. The government then pulled out. I mean, I was trying to explain it on telly, and I was like, well, it's blowing my mind. How am I going to explain this to viewers?
The tragedy is not just how complicated it is and how terrible everybody looked, but the actual position between the main political parties in the House of Commons.
Bag paper.
It's not that
It's
big.
like that.
And if we really wanted to, there's no vote in our parliament that's going to change what the Israeli Defence Force does in Gaza right now. Not a single one. But in terms of if you're wanting to send messages, saying that there's a unified United Kingdom that has a unified position, which we could have got to, there is no way that you couldn't get to a form of words if the individual parties wanted to be on the same page. And we could have done that, and we didn't. And that is the shame.
Yeah, because
that is the real shame.
And you came out, Jess, because I was standing in Central Lobby, and you came out, and you looked so pissed off.
You were
so pissed off, and you said to me, and I hope you don't mind, I nicked it from my piece that night because obviously I'm the magpie around here. You said, if we can't lay down words, how can we ask other people to lay down arms? But the point is, the reason I brought this up was going back to what you said about Parliament. Everyone was bad actors in that, right? You had the SNP, and I know they're very cross at me. Yeah. They're cross at me for saying this, and I'm sure I'll get a load of pile-on for this. But
that
they were
trying on your third phone.
My third phone. Come on, voice note me up.
Yeah. But I have a degree of sympathy as well. I mean, I think they were trying to electioneer. I also think they were done dirty by the Speaker. You can hold both views at the same time.
So you had they were trying to put Labour in a position, but they did also want they wanted to have their opposition debate on their ceasefire position, which they're an opposition party, fair enough. You had Labour that really did not want that amendment to go down without that motion to go, that amending it because they were in a world of pain and I was told that front benchers might quit. You Definitely. Resigned in the last one. Yeah. And then you had the Conservative Party the government going, oh, well, this is all awful, so we're going to withdraw our... Knowing that by saying we're not voting, we're not taking part, that it would cause this rabble, chaos.
The Tories actually were at risk of... so the exact thing that they're saying about the Labour Party, which is that Keir Starmer didn't want to lose the vote. Of course, that's the case. Yeah. Of course, he didn't. You don't put down votes to lose them. Although in opposition, you learn to take it. The Tories were in trouble. So I spoke to every single Tory I spoke to was going to vote for the Labour motion, and that the Tories motion was going to fail. And actually, it was quite risky because on a matter of foreign policy, if the Tories had lost the vote. Yeah. Then
the government falls.
The government falls.
Is in the big picture of it, we know the insides and outsides of it, but the voters must be looking at it going, what are they all doing?
There's people that can't do their bloody jobs. And they're too busy fighting to do their bloody
100%,
jobs.
That's what it is.
Because Parliament is now a campaign vehicle. That you're saying this isn't.
And it's going to get worse.
Yes.
Because of what Lindsay Hoyle did, the Speaker did, and because he upset almost everybody. You saw at the Prime Minister question time that we had on Wednesday, you saw that he was gelded. And that's no use to anyone. His authority is completely gone, and he's going to have to spend weeks building that back up. At which point, the behaviour of parliamentarians in the big set piece stuff will get worse because they know that he can't slap them down. Because it's, in a weird way, this kind of honour system of listening to this one guy that you elect that sits up on the fancy throne, even though he's got no real powers, particularly. But the kind of assumed mantle of authority has left. It's completely gone. So there's nobody running the show now, in a sense, and it will get worse, and it'll look even worse to people out there that already have a pretty low opinion of politics.
But Jess, the Speaker, you've got a bit of sympathy with him. You thought what he did,
yeah,
he did in good faith.
I do have sympathy with him, and I was never would have ever cast myself as Lindsay Hoyle's cheerleader. I have sympathy with him on the basis that he made the decision on our security. That definitely, I believe that. I actually, in a day of a lack of good faith for me, I have genuine good faith and trust in the fact that the Speaker did make that decision on the basis of representations to him about the security of members of Parliament. Whether I agree with that or not, and would have made that decision myself is actually I don't think
I don't think that's his decision to make, and I also think it's the wrong decision.
But also I don't think it's a fair reflection of reality. I get, as somebody who has faced security threats for now nearly a decade. I mean, the decisions like that weren't made during Brexit because of security risks against us. I think making out like it's worse at the moment, and this idea of mob rule, I can't help but feel that that's because some of the people who are upset with us at the moment have got brown faces. Like, I don't think that was the speaker making that, but this conversation that's come out of what the speaker did, all about security, is I have to say, I've been a bit shocked by it.
Well, let's put this in a bit of historical context, because if you're talking about threats to MPs and threats to government, and what he did, if we're taking it in good faith, that he did it because of the security, and I accept that he may well have done, but he unilaterally made the decision to change the way we do democracy in that case because of a perceived threat against members of the House, right?
Yeah.
So he changed the rules because people were threatening. Like, I am not a Thatcherite Tory. People would like spit their tea out in my party if they thought that was going to, big her up. But she was physically bombed at her party conference at 3:00 in the morning. She was out in the street. After the Brighton bombing, she lost an MP, a junior minister. There was 4 people that were killed in that bombing. By 9:30, she was on the platform making a speech. She ditched all the anti-Labour stuff that was going to be in it, the attack lines, and did a unity speech saying, the terrorists don't get to win. You don't get to affect how we do stuff. There were still people in the hospital when she stood up and made the point of saying, that's not how we do this in this country. We don't change our democracy because people threaten us with violence, because democracy is more important than any individual party. And that's not Lindsay Hoyle's decision to make on behalf of 650 people that are MPs.
Some MPs, particularly Conservative MPs, were saying to me after that, the problem is, and it goes back to what you just said, Ruth, is that if people who are going to be extreme, small pockets of people going to be extremes, think that they can bounce Parliament by being threatening, all it does is say, well, be more threatening.
Completely. Right? You just rewarded people.
But the second thing is, because part of this is trying to say, how can we do politics better, or what would work better? And what you've touched on there is that you can see the dysfunction in Parliament. Actually, if political leaders sort of lay down their arms of these war of words and this stoking up divisions between each other, and actually did a bit less attacks and a bit more unity, could that be a moment where actually...
There is no reason why there isn't a meeting between the Prime Minister, the Leader of the Opposition, the Leader of the SNP, the Leader of the Lib Democrats, and they can sit down and agree a joint form of words on the Middle East process and a joint form of words on Ukraine, but they're too busy campaigning.
The truth is that even if Rishi Sunak couldn't do that, with all the other parties could have done it. And it would have passed.
The Speaker of the Parliament has apologised for the way in which that vote was held, and the way that you couldn't even hear the Deputy Speaker, and people didn't even know that there was vote happening.
In this instance, Ruth, you are absolutely right. Yes. Believe you me, and the Labour Party knows that I will be a pain in the arse to them as well.
Surely they'll try and bind you back in after an election, get you back on the front bench. Well, not back in cabinet. It'd be in cabinet. It won't even be shadow cabinet.
Yeah. I sort of wish that being a shadow was as glamorous as it sounds.
It sounds cooler.
Like being
it does
like
sound cooler.
A spy or something. Yeah. Or like, you're in the shadows. It's really not. It's really lame.
You'd have a red box, a driver, bag carrier. Imagine it.
I wouldn't mind a driver. Can you have like sort of cabinet office makeup artist?
I just don't get into the makeup chat. Do you know what I mean? I just,
we'll overdo our side
more
of it.
More pit pony than show pony over in this corner, I have to say.
I'm a pit pony. I actually had an ex-boy. Right, so I've got quite stocky legs, right? And I do quite a lot of running, so they're quite muscular. And I did a lot of ballet when I was younger, so there you go. And I had an ex-boyfriend,
strong and flexible, Beth.
And he used to call me, he used to come up to me and call me a pit pony and neigh in my ear. Pit pony. We broke up.
He called you a pit pony?
He called me a pit pony sort of in an affectionate way, but I think it's slightly a put down, isn't it?
My husband calls me half a job, Jess.
I mean...
is that because everything's left unfinished?
Not those sorts of jobs.
I
can't empty the dishwasher.
Right, okay.
Half a job.
I can't believe that your ex-boyfriend,
called me a pit pony.
Well, no, if it was a strong thigh reference, why didn't he just call you, Xenia Onatop or something like that?
Well, we're not together anymore.
Xena the Warrior Princess. Oh,
I'd love... No, I was just a bloody pit pony.
What did he do?
No, I can't remember. It was about 30 years ago. So we've got to go about next week, the budget.
Yeah.
It's the big one, the biggie budget.
Yeah. The budget, I don't expect that much from the budget. We're currently having a load of conversations about tax cuts. If I were to have 5 minutes in front of Jeremy Hunt, what I'd tell him is that never once in my entire political career have I knocked a door and somebody asked me for a tax cut. What they say, things like, oh, I can't get a dentist appointment, I can't get, I'd really like it if my kid's school wasn't falling down. Public services as they are, the idea that the Tories are currently looking for the headroom away from public services into essentially what will appear like an electoral bribe, which for most people would amount to probably about 40 quid a month when they're already paying high taxes. I just would beg of him not to do it.
So when you talk to people in government, I've been sort of making a few phone calls this week about kind of how do they want to frame the budget. Okay, put it in the context of there's been quite a lot of Rishi Sunak resets of late, starting in sort of October, where look, and what these big moments are is it's an opportunity for a leader who is not managing to close the gap in the polls, and it's stayed at about 18 points ever since Sunak was made PM. Like, can they begin to close the gap? Can they give voters something that might make them look again at the Tories? And we've been talking about Parliament and Parliament not working, partly because everyone is in campaign mode. So every single thing is now through the election of the lens of a general election. When I talk to people, they say they don't think that this budget will necessarily be a poll game changer, as they put it. Don't laugh. But what this budget, I think, will do is what they'll be trying to do is give voters proof points. So they'll say, look, we said we were going to halve inflation, economy, although the Rishi recession does not help this narrative.
Yeah.
We're in a technical recession, which means 2 consecutive quarters of no economic growth.
Negative growth,
sorry, yeah. But there's no shortcut, stick with us, we're going to get on the job, and then they will give some tax cuts, right? As I understand it, there's a big debate in the Conservative Party, and Ruth, I'd love to hear what you think about this, about whether you do inheritance tax cuts, affects a tiny proportion of voters, but in Conservative seats, very appealing as a policy, or do they stick with tax cuts for working people? And as I understand it, it will be in the latter that their thinking is, because they also, Labour will attack them on inheritance tax cuts, right? So, are we going to see another 1 pence, 2 pence of national insurance, all about the narrative about stick with the Tories, don't risk it with Labour? Ruth, do you think it can work?
I think this idea of what is the story that we go into the election on is a really good one, because we're on our 5th leader since we became either the government or the coalition government. And each one of them has done almost the inverse of papal infallibility, in that they've made a point of doing the opposite of what the one before did. We've got no coherent narrative for what a Tory government is, what it's for. Is it for sound finances? Is it for fixing the roof when the sun is shining, which is what Osborne and Cameron used to say? Is it for paying down our debt so that our children don't have to pay it back? Is it for being strong and stable in government, like Theresa May used to say? Is it, Boris's great big schemes of, like, garden bridges and all other sort of getting Brexit done? People feel like Brexit isn't done, not that I support Brexit and was on the other side. For Rishi, is it making sure that we've got a pro-growth economy, even though it's stagnating and we've got the highest tax burden that we've ever had? Like, what is our message?
You forgot Liz.
Well, I'm trying desperately hard to forget Liz.
Just
trying desperately hard.
Yeah.
So I don't know what the message is.
That's
going
because
into
you're
that.
part of the conspiracy that got rid of her.
I'm a deep state. I'm deep state, and I've never been cooler.
Right.
If I'm part of the deep state, oh my God, that's brilliant.
So Ruth,
yeah,
right. So you don't think the Conservatives will win an election? Do you think
I think all the evidence points to this being a 97 election and not a 92, and I think up until maybe September, October of last year, there was still enough people in the party that believed it could be a 92. There was the chance of a 92 that they were willing to pretty much hang together. And that's gone now. And I think all discipline is gone.
What you just said there about 5 different leaders since 2010, do you think they should win? Do they deserve to win?
I don't think anyone deserves anything in politics. I think you have to work for it. But I think there are change elections and there are continuity elections, and this feels very much like a change election.
Next week, we can unpick this a bit more. Interestingly, actually, you know, Keir Starmer, when you interview, he hates answering the question, but if you keep asking him, eventually he will answer the question. Because I think ultimately he thinks, oh, I've got to, you know.
Why do politicians do that?
Anyway.
Well, I don't think Keir Starmer's alone, but why is it that
I don't know.
when asked a question, answer it? I mean, that is,
that's why I like doing this podcast with you, because you answer the question. It's so new, Ruth. It's so refreshing in my life of obfuscation.
You know, that's the one thing I took into politics, because I had this weird trajectory where I got elected in May and I was the leader by November. Like, this never kind of happened before. And that's not the sign of a healthy party. You know, there's got a lot of competition for it. And the one thing that I took in with me was that people aren't daft. Even people that pay no attention to politics and they don't watch Question Time or Newsnight or anything like that. They just maybe have the telly on when they're making their tea and the 6 o'clock news comes on or whatever. Like, people, one, they know if a politician believes what they're saying, so just don't say stuff you don't believe.
Yeah.
They know whether you're answering the question or not, so just bloody do it.
Yeah.
And even if they disagree with you, they will respect you more if you can put your case. And they will give you points for that more than if you just don't want to offend people, so you don't tell them what you actually believe in case you believe something different to them.
Yeah.
They like you more if they disagree with you, but they know that you're got conviction, that you believe it, that you can try and make the case, that you're willing to have the discussion, to have the debate and part as friends. You get points for that. So I don't know why politicians don't ever answer questions.
I do remember, though, was it Sajid Javid launch or the Michael Gove launch? It was in the tower.
I wasn't at Michael Gove's. It was Sajid's.
But was the Sajid at the top of the tower?
Yeah.
That was the one. That was the one before 2019. So it was 2017.
Yeah.
And you were there. This is a bit like
sycophantic.
Yeah, it's really sycophantic. I'm just going to tell you as I gaze over the mics. I was really fangirling you because I'd never really met you, and you were in the room and I was like, oh my God, Ruth Davidson's here and I've never really met her. And I sort of came up to you and went hi and just sort of looked at you just like, what are you doing? Anyway, that was the first time I met you. You don't even remember. It's okay. Right, okay.
I remembered a Velma Kelly bob with some dashing red lipstick.
I knew I recognised you.
Or, Not
Velma from Scooby-Doo. Velma from Chicago. Velma Kelly.
No, sorry. I was thinking of the Scooby-Doo.
No, that's more my sisterhood. Yeah.
You know, my cat's called Scooby in this theme, just saying.
Oh, wow.
You don't like cats, don't you?
No, it's not that I don't like them. I'm like, there's cat lesbians and there's dog lesbians, and I'm very much a dog lesbian. So
I thought all lesbians were cat lesbians.
No.
So making assumptions.
Yeah, no, dog lesbian.
Because where I live apparently has one of the highest populations of lesbians, and you can tell because there's like 3 different cat organisations.
Is that because you live in a no-go area?
Yeah, it's a no-go area because there's so many cats and lesbians.
I tell you what,
in this no-go area that has loads of Muslims, also has loads of lesbians, by the way, Paul.
I've got to move on. Sorry. I've got totally, actually, yeah. Now, I want to move on.
All those lesbians, whereabouts in England do you live?
Come to my house anytime. Can I just say that I almost certainly won't put this in, but we call them the clitorata.
At least they can find it.
Every year for the last 9 years, I've read out the names of all the women killed by men. It is both all the women in Britain killed by men in Britain and any British woman killed abroad by a man as well gets included on the list.
How many names did you read out yesterday?
Yesterday was 102 names in total, but 98 from the last year. And also at the same time, yesterday was the day that the Home Secretary came to Parliament to present the Angelini review into what went wrong with Wayne Couzens, the man who killed Sarah Everard. And I stood up in the statement to the Home Secretary before I'd read out the names and was told that things have changed since the death of Sarah Everard, to remind him that 340 women have been murdered in our country by men since Sarah Everard. And I have had enough of the platitudes. And so every year I do it as an act of memorial.
I watched you do that yesterday. I watched it after, so I got a clip of it. The families are in the gallery. I saw your face.
So I made a sort of quite angry and rabble-rousing speech before I read the names this year, and normally I don't. Normally I go with more in sorrow than in anger, but I'm just really angry now that nothing has changed. But at the point I started to read out the actual names, I looked up, and the families of women from this year's list and previous year's lists were in the gallery. They all stood up in the gallery as an act of respect to the list, like these women's names, and I just started to cry as I was reading it, and I've never ever done that. And I text my husband. He texts me. Funnily enough, when I said my husband doesn't listen to any of my output, doesn't pay any attention to anything that I do. This he does, funnily enough, and he texted me in the morning and said, "I hope today goes all right. I'll be thinking of you." And I texted him back and said, "Oh, I cried for the first time in 9 years." And he was like, he just sent me a message back saying, "It might not feel like it, but it's a good thing that you're not used to it." I want to say that the Home Secretary, James Cleverly, there's 16 recommendations in the Angelini review. Didn't commit to a single one of the recommendations. And to do this pulling back the curtain that we're going to do on this podcast, he will have had that review. It had to be published by the Home Office. He will have had that review for at least 2 weeks. It wasn't that, I've only just got this 200-page report and I haven't read it, and so I don't know whether I'm going to do the recommendations. He will have had it for 2 weeks. I have to say, I'm not entirely sure he'd read it by the time he even stood up in Parliament. But he was not willing to commit to a single one of the recommendations of it yesterday. And actually, most of those recommendations have been well known since Sarah Everard died 3 years ago. He wasn't willing to commit to a single one. And the best he announced yesterday was that police officers, once they have been found guilty of certain crimes against women, they would be suspended from being police officers. So in that case, Wayne Couzens would have allowed to have been a police officer until the moment that he was found guilty of murdering Sarah Everard.
I mean, the report basically says he should never have been given a job.
No.
But there's nothing actually currently to stop this happening again. And isn't
that's what the report says.
And if you are Sarah Everard's parents, I mean...
If you're any woman, because the thing that's so upsetting about the Sarah Everard case is because he was a policeman.
Yeah.
Was because he used his warrant card, because he was acting as if he was doing a public service and keeping the public safe.
She'd be alive if he'd not been a police officer.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what her family said. They said she would still be alive today if he was not a police officer, because she would not have gotten in the car with a man that wasn't showing a warrant card and arresting her and using her handcuffs.
Yeah.
And the idea that it's the people that are supposed to keep us safe that are perpetrating the violence, that's the bit that goes to the core of this. And that's when the women were protesting about this and then getting lifted by the police. That's why it was so shocking. That's why all these millions of people, millions of women across the country who would never go on a march themselves, that were quite happy to just
Kate Middleton.
Yeah, exactly. Just like, they are not political people.
Yeah.
We're just
of Wales.
Yeah.
We're just so, like, there's something so fundamental about that. And I tell you what, if the Home Office drags their feet on part one of this, I mean, I don't know if they know who they're dealing with. Eilish Angelini is a smart woman. She used to be the Solicitor General of Scotland, who used to then became the Lord Advocate, the first woman to ever hold both of these posts. You know, she's got 2 more parts to come out of this. She is thorough, she is smart, she will be forensic, and there will be more recommendations. And I feel a bit bad for her that the headline that everybody used yesterday was just Wayne Couzens should never have been a policeman. Well, no shit, Sherlock. Like, we all know that. Like, but actually, if you look at the recommendations that she had...
Brilliant report, brilliant.
It was really well written. And also stuff like... Why? Because he was reported for exposing himself, and she was saying, "Look, we know that people who are flashers or who," and it then it went up to like masturbatory flashing and all the rest of it. People, there is that kind of conveyor belt. In the same ways, we know that people who abuse animals as children have a greater chance of going on to becoming violent against people as they age. She's saying, even if that conveyor belt didn't exist, and we know it does, we should take things like flashing seriously because they are an invasion, because they are a power play. And it's all about that power of men exerting over women. And you know, I think the Home Office would be crazy not to listen to the recommendations that she's put forward.
I guess so, and we'll do in the next
and we'll
come back to this. I guess part of it as well is just going back to this what we talked about the dysfunction of Parliament and government at the moment, which is everyone's waiting for election, and so no one's doing anything. And it might be that, I'm sure what you will do, Jess, is make sure those recommendations are bound into a future Labour manifesto,
100%.
right?
I reckon the people are probably most hurt, outside of Sarah Everard's family and friends and all the rest of it, are decent police officers who have had drawn through the mud because of those dickheads that are sharing pictures of corpses on WhatsApp or making sexist jokes. Like, how hard must it be to be a policeman? Police officer, sorry. How hard must it be to be a police officer who has to work with those dickheads?
We've got to stop because Ruth's got to go. So what's everyone right, Ruth, what are we all doing this weekend? Come.
It was my brother's birthday yesterday, which was on the 29th of February. So my 44-year-old brother, Luke, turned 11 yesterday. And my mum, because my mum...
Are you taking him paintballing?
Yeah. My mother... claimed that she didn't... my late mother claimed she didn't realise that he was born on the 29th of February until he was like 8. She was like that. Oh yeah, we haven't bothered. He's a third child. They didn't bother to have parties and things. But thereafter, she always made a massive fuss of his actual birthdays when the 29th of February. So all of my family are back for the weekend.
So it's a big one.
So I'm going to a no-go area in Birmingham with. But look, I am taking some Muslim people with me, so I'll be able to go into the no areas. But luckily, my sister-in-law is Iranian, and so my nephews are half Iranian, and luckily they're going to protect me in the Birmingham no-go area as I walk around to go for dinner. One of them's 6 and one of them's 10, so don't worry, I will lend them to Paul Scully should he wish to walk down a street in my area.
So you've got a party, Ruth?
I'm going to watch the rugby, and I think I'm being sent sofa shopping with my wife, which is the.
I am there for that. I love sofa shopping.
To be fair, can I say what I did last weekend? Because I took my son to Ninja Warrior UK Centre. I skinned my elbow and my knee trying to push kids out the way to do the stuff.
Ninja Warrior. We should go on a podcast outing to Ninja Warrior. I would be rubbish.
In Leith. Oh yeah, I was dreadful. But they've got a bouncy castle bit for the littler kids, so that's the bit I was on, an inflatable course.
And I'm doing something very cultural. I don't normally do this, so normally I just sit at home in my gym jams, cook food, watch telly, drink gin. But I'm actually going to go to watch The Picture of Dorian Gray, the play with Sarah Snook.
Yeah, and she's playing every part.
Every part. Apparently, I'm very excited about it.
I hope it's brilliant because I love Sarah Snook, and I'd like to encourage theatre going in all its forms. But somebody said to me, don't waste the money on the ticket because it was slightly mad.
Telling me though that what you're actually saying to me is you're telling
somebody
me
told me it was shit.
Time.
Is what I'm actually saying, but I was trying to be.
Shall I feed back next week?
Yes, I'd like to hear because I love Sarah Snook.
I love her too. I love
and
Succession.
The Picture of Dorian Gray is
Sarah Snook?
She's the one from Succession. She's Shiv from Succession. I mean, it's literally based in Scotland. Half of it. How disloyal of you not to have watched Succession? I know, and Brian
Cox is in it.
Yeah.
I've not got. It's on the list.
Honestly. Watch it. It's really good.
You've missed out on culture.
So I don't watch Succession. But I'm not really into getting my makeup done. Do I even fit in with you? Are you like Mean Girls? Are you going to be the clique and I'm going to be like the outsider? Is that what this is going to be? Right. Okay.
Yes.
At least I know my place.
So that's it for this week. I'm Beth Rigby. You are
Jess Phillips.
Ruth Davidson.
Thanks for listening. Now get in touch with us. Remember the email? electoraldysfunction@sky.uk. Tweet me at Beth Rigby, or you can leave me a WhatsApp on my third phone, 07934 200 444. That's 07934 200 444. Yeah.
Also, if you want to send us abusive messages, just remember that I will just send that straight to Special Branch.
Okay. Right, now we're going to be back next week, but in the meantime, also, you might want to follow. We've got another Sky News podcast, Politics at Jack and Sam's, with my brilliant colleague, Sam Coates, and also Politico's Jack Blanchard. They do it on a Sunday, and they go and spend the whole weekend working, phoning up, find out what's going on for the week ahead in Westminster, and then they basically tell you, and it sets you up for a week ahead in politics. It drops on Sunday evening, so you've got us for a bit, then you've got them. Check it out. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll be back next week. We're locked in. Right, that was good, thanks.
We are actually locked
We're
in.
locked
They lock
in.
it in from the other side.
We're locked in. Can you open the door?
Ruth needs to go.
Fair enough.
No, really? Can someone go and
They're coming.
let us out? We're locked. Why do they lock us in?
Because we're at flight risk.